Welcome. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. And the portion that we're working on is B'Shalach this week. And it's about crossing the Red Sea, the miracle of crossing the Red Sea. There are also other parts too. This is the Parsha. We won't be doing it, at least not for the next foreseeable future, but it also deals with the manna in the wilderness and all the failures, spiritual failures that are so typically human in regards to that. So I love the section on the manna because it really illustrates so beautifully our lack of appreciation and the fact that we don't want to be told what to do and things like that. They really come out in this particular portion on all kinds of levels. So those are the two major sections. There's certainly other sections too. There's the thing about certainly complaining, realizing to what degree trying to hear ourselves when we're complaining and trying to rid ourselves of that, because complaining is like the antithesis of appreciation. So when you fill yourself with a sense of conscious appreciation, you start to move away and you hear yourself when you're complaining. And complaining is different from identifying an issue and trying to then find ways to solve it. All right, let's go to the screen share and find the passage where we left off last year. So we are here at this particular point. We're right at the point where we haven't split the sea yet. But God is telling Moses what he's about to do. Of course, the Israelites are terrified because they see the Egyptian army and charioteers pursuing them, and they're, of course, stuck in front of the sea. They're basically cut off from any escape, and that's the nature of this huge miracle that's about to take place. Incidentally, we should also realize, and this comes out in the subsequent poem that is composed, is that people hear about this, and when they hear about it, essentially, the people in Canaan are terrified at the power of the Israelites that are coming upon them. So we left off at verse 20. Here you can see where we made the marking for Rashi. So let's take a look at what's going on. So here at verse 19 is where this miracle begins. And it starts by, they now refer to the pillar of cloud and the pillar of fire as a malach, as an emissary, as an agent, as an angel. And it cuts off essentially the Israelites from the Egyptians. So now we are actually describing the miracle. Vayavur bein machane Mitzrayim, it interposed between the Egyptian camp, machane, Egyptian camp, uvein machane Yisrael, and the Israelite camp. Vayhi ha'anan v'ha'choshech, and there were, normally, of course, we know that the pillar of cloud appeared during the day and the pillar of fire appeared by night. They would simply, I guess, morph from one into the other. But in this case, we have both of them. I think that's the point of the statement, saying, and there was the cloud, anan cloud, v'hachoshech, and the darkness, v'ya'er et halayla. So the pillar of this cloud was now also bright, or it was also fire. It says v'ya'er et halayla, and it brightened the night. It gave light to the night. V'lo karav, that's a verb, ze el ze, and the one did not draw near the other, kol halayla, for the entire night. So when it says the one didn't draw near to the other, what are we referring to? And that's what Rashi is going to address. Excuse me 1 second, I'm going to mute. Thank you. So here we go. Vayavur bein machane Mitzrayim, and it came between the camp of Egypt, the Egyptian camp. So, Mashal Lamelech, this is a beautiful poetic explanation of this. It can be compared to Mahalech Baderech, to one who is walking along the way, going along the way, Uvno Mahalech Lefanav, and his son is walking before him. So you've got this picture of a man who's walking on a path, and his son is walking in front of him. Ba'ulistim, and they encounter bandits, robbers, lishvuto, to capture him. Natlu milfanav, or natlo milfanav. So this man takes his son from before him, unetanola acharav, and places his son behind him. Ba'u ze'evim, and at the same time, or let's say in another occasion, wolves approach, me'acharav, from behind them, natno lefanav, so then he places his son in front of him. Ba'u listim lefanav uzve'im me'acharav, if the two unfortunately happen at the same time, in other words, the bandits come before him, in front of him, and the wolves behind him, Netano Azro'o, he then takes his son in his arms, V'nilcham bahem, and he battles against them. Kach, and so we have in Hosea, the prophet Hosea, referring to this in chapter 11 of Hosea, V'anochi tirgalti le'Ephraim, and I led Ephraim, Tachem al Zero'otav, he took them. This is, I think, all from Hosea. He took them upon his arms. So, referring metaphorically to how God protected the Israelites in such a personal kind of way, such a demonstration of divine protection. Vahi hanan v'hachoshech, right? So it says the cloud and the darkness, leMitzrayim. So just explaining this verse, when I translated the verse originally, I wasn't so clear about it, but now with Rashi, we can become clearer, we can get clearer about this, that the cloud and the darkness, that the cloud, I assume, created for them, right, was for the Egyptians, Vaya'er, and it brightened up, Amud Ha'esh. And Rashi's telling us we should understand that this is referring, even though the verse doesn't explicitly refer to it, it's referring to the pillar of fire. Et halayla, it brightened up the night, the Yisrael, for the Israelites. In other words, this sense of distinction that takes place, that the Bible wants us to understand, and that part of it so much has to do with our willingness to accept God as our Elohim. That in our own behavior and how we react and how we allow God to be our master has to do, what it does is, in a sense, cement this relationship and this protection. And even though, obviously, the Jewish people have been attacked over the years, nevertheless, they still survive. They still survive. And I think we're supposed to have a great belief in another world. And I think sometimes that world, the world of souls, is referred to as Gan Eden, as the Garden of Eden, and to understand that our consciousness, the very fact that we're conscious, the fact that life is so brief, no matter what, no matter how long you live, it is, when you compare it to eternity, it is nothing, practically nothing, that there's something much greater ahead of us, and that's where a lot of these issues become resolved. And I may have mentioned this recently, but I really am starting to feel that the fact that we have moved away from any sense of life after death, that we don't believe in any sense of immortality, has also led, forgive the pun, to immorality. Because having a sense of something beyond this life, and also recognizing that we're accountable and that we will be held accountable for the life we have led here, can act as a great a teacher in terms of how we look at our own behavior and our own egotism and things like that. And that in a way, it's a great shame that and probably as a result of all the comforts that we have in life now, we've run away from this idea of immortality. And I think it really is behind so much of what is going on here. To say, and that perhaps the contribution of Judaism is that we have to earn it, that our abilities, our lives are all in a million and one ways, opportunities to earn immortality. And of course, the Torah would be the foundation, at least for the Jewish people, it would be a foundation of achieving that. So just a thought along with this. The holech lifnehem, so this pillar of fire is brightening the night for the Israelites, and it goes before them, kedarcho, in its normal way, lalechet kol halayla, so that they could march the entire night. V'hachoshech shel arafel, and the darkness of the mist, of the cloud, right, that side Mitzrayim, that was on the Egyptian side. So Rashi is really helpful here in terms of clarifying what this verse was trying to describe. V'lo karav ze el ze, and it says, and when the verse says, and the one didn't draw near the other, and this is according to the midrash, this halachic midrash called the Mechilta, which is, as I said, still extant. I've mentioned it before. Machane el machane, one encampment did not draw near the other encampment. So they were being protected also here. The Israelites were being protected from the fact that the Egyptians couldn't catch up with them. So to try and give them obviously some sense of, to lessen their anxiety on some kind of level. Next, Vayet Moshe et yado al hayam. Moses stretched out his hand over the sea. Vayolech Hashem et hayam baruch kadim azah kol halayla. And Hashem, the Lord, caused to, what he did was he caused through a east wind, a very strong east wind, the entire night to blow on the sea, right? To blow over the sea. Vayasim et hayam acharava. And he caused, or the wind caused the sea to become dry land. Vayivaku hamayim, and the waters split. So that's, here we have the actual verse that describes the miracle. Baruch kadim azah. So Rashi is dealing with the idea that it says a strong, a powerful east wind. And what is the need? What's the force of this powerful part? That it was an east wind and that it was powerful. And again, he's referring to the Mechilta, Baruch Kadim. So essentially, it was an east wind. And I believe that when you describe winds, you're talking about the direction from which they are coming. If you're talking about a west wind, you're talking about a wind that's blowing from the west. Okay, I believe that's also true in the Israelite description, or in the Hebrew description as well, the biblical description. So this east wind, shehi azah sheberuchot, and he's saying that here it's not that this particular east wind was powerful. He says, Rashi is saying we should understand that when it says a powerful east wind, it's that east winds are powerful. Winds that come from the east are powerful, okay? Uzah sheberuchot hu haruach. So he says, hu haruach, comma, this is the wind, shehakadosh baruch hu, that the Holy One, blessed be He, with which the Holy One, blessed be He, nifra ba min harishaim, extracts retribution from the wicked. So, what is the image that is being presented to us by the east wind? So This is just a thought. I don't have necessarily any support for what I'm going to share with you. But one thing I do know is that the word kadim, which means east, is also understood as meaning previous. Kodem means before. So we know that the Israelite nation originated back in Ur of the Chaldees in Mesopotamia. And that, of course, although it's sometimes described as north of the land of Israel, it also, of course, we know from a map that it's east of the land of Israel. So I think that poetically and metaphorically, this is also referring to ancestry and the fact that the Jewish people are descended from the patriarchs and their families, and that there is great value given to that idea, and that this east, the reason why it would be an east wind, may also have some reference in some way to the worthiness of the Jewish people, of the Israelites, and also of our ancestors, and to what extent it represents worthiness in terms of protecting us from our enemies and God holding accountable wickedness. Shenemar. So here we go, just talking about the fact that this east wind is the one that God uses to extract retribution from the wicked. And here we have a citation, a proof text, Yirmiyah Yud-Chet. So this looks like Jeremiah 18. And here it goes. Baruch Kadim Afitzeim. It says, with an east wind, I will scatter them. And another proof text, Hosea 13, Yavo Kadim Ruach Hashem. Okay, an east wind from God will arrive. And then so the idea of this east wind possibly representing a divine act of some kind. Not that all natural occurrences ultimately have a divine origin to them, a divine source, but there's an intention involved that's being brought up here for us to consider. Ezekiel 27, Ruach HaKadim, okay, Shevarech B'Lev Yamim, an east wind which broke you in the heart of the seas. And another, look at all these proof texts that Rashi is amassing for us in terms of supporting the notion of this level of intention with regards to the east wind and its relationship to retribution. So
All
Isaiah,
three of them talk about it being from God.
say that again?
All three of those
Yes.
examples talk about it being from God.
Right. Thank you. Yeah, good point. Isaiah 27, Haga Berucho Hakasha, the translation that I looked at said he removed her. So I believe this is Haga. I think this is a gimel. Okay. I also think it also could mean to drive out, or to drive her out with his, and here's the kasha, right? With his powerful wind. The Yom Kadim. There we go. The Yom Kadim. Possibly this means in the day of an east wind.
So yeah, this one says he spoke with his harsh wind on the
Okay.
day of the east wind.
I like that better. I'm going to change my translation. I really like that. So, Hegyon Libi, Yehu Ratzon Limrefi, the prayer we say, I think it's from Psalm 19. And Hegyon means, again, my words. So thank you. Yeah, there's Hegyon, that's the word. So Haggah from this root, okay, he spoke, and I'm leaving this out. That makes a lot more sense. Thank you, Lauren. That's helpful. All right. Now that makes total sense. Vayivaku hamayim, and the waters split. Kol mayim, and it says because the waters. Rashi is saying, and again, we need to understand this. or to try to understand this in terms of its poetic intent. And he says here, Kol Maim Olam. In other words, all water in the world, in the universe. And again, this is based on the Mechilta. So they're again looking at the text and getting a sense of what the text is trying to get across. Yeah, that the waters split, and very often, of course, back in early Genesis, it was talking about the waters that were created, the primordial waters. So again, yeah, go ahead.
It also in Genesis referred to this when it referred to the splitting of the waters, it was like God pulling apart the heaven and the water, Shamayim and Mayim. And so it was almost as if they were one substance. And I'm wondering if there's any thought here when it says all the waters of the universe, whether that also includes the heavens being split.
So, good question. I'll tell you where I'm going on that. I mean, I need to think about what you just said. My sense here is, that I've mentioned earlier on that in the creation of the waters back in Genesis, we get the strong sense of how waters are a way of judging humanity, that we are judged by means of the waters, and that having an adequate water supply, etc., is so vital to human existence. And so that, and not only that, we also know that water, when it floods, can also put an end to human life. And we have an example of that, of course, with Noah. So here, when it's talking about splitting, right? Essentially, splitting something means making a distinction between one and another. And whether or not this is so a deeply poetic way of symbolizing a judgment being made at this time in terms of wickedness. In other words, if we take together everything that Rashi's saying here in this comment, that's saying that the splitting of the Red Sea, in a way, represents a judgment against the wicked on the part of the divine.
Yeah, well, and also you have taught us or taught me that water is sometimes a metaphor for Torah, and Torah comes from heaven towards us, towards not Torah, us,
Yes.
and the split, I think, has to do with the Jewish people and not the Jewish people,
Yes.
and it seems to be that it's saying that this Torah and this type of judgment, be that harsher or less harsh or whatever, because certainly they're doing a harsh judgment on Egypt right now, but I'm not sure this doesn't imply a potential harsher judgment for us, with all this talk about, well, potentially at least, about Torah and heaven and all the wind coming from God. And it's right now kind of the clouds and the wind and everything are punishing Egypt, the darkness and everything protecting us.
Yes.
But there's always the future, and it's not true that we'll always be protected in that way. I mean, we will also be punished. I'm not saying we won't be protected, you know,
Right.
eventually in the world to come or whatever, but it just, I don't know, this brings up a lot. I don't know how much I'm just kind of making up here or whether or not there's a
No, I think
implication.
you're right. No, I think you're right. And we have to understand, I like, there's a commercial that sometimes says we answer to our higher authority. And I think that is absolutely, I think this is brought out in Amos, where he says a line that sort of goes, you I have chosen from all people, therefore I will visit upon you all your iniquities. In other words, the fact that we are more privileged, that if to whatever extent we are more privileged, simply places a higher level of responsibility on us as well. That the two go along with each other, and that it's not a matter of vaunting ourselves or being arrogant about it. If anything, we should be humbly grateful for it and enact in a far more responsible kind of way. That more is expected of us because of these particular privileges, and that's the way we need to understand it, and not as a goad to hurt others or to use it against others. And I'm very uncomfortable with particularism, and I try to understand when we talk about the chosen people, to understand it in its full implication, which means their benefits, but there are also responsibilities that go along with those benefits, and, as I think you're bringing out, implied liabilities, so that God expects more of us because of this privileged position that we hold. And
And
go ahead.
all of religion, of Jewish religion, in a sense, is about particularism, about Jewish and not Jewish,
Right.
children of Israel and other people. And I mean, it may be why Catholicism is called Catholicism, because that's meant to be, universal. But
Right.
um, the mitzvot, a lot of them seem to have really no reason, but one thing that it results from them, whether or not it's a stated motivation, is separation.
Yes.
You can't like go to a barbecue and eat with everyone and break bread with them. It's not kosher.
That is
Even
correct.
the hot dog brand you mentioned is not ortho
Yes.
kosher.
Well, yes, that's getting into other issues altogether. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's I see that we have just a little bit, well, we have a little more time. So yeah, no, I think this is all being brought out here. And so this whole notion of Havdalah, right? This idea of to make a distinction, that's right there in Genesis chapter 1. And to understand the fundamental binary
But
nature of the world. So let's take another verse and then we'll see how far we can go with this. And the children of Israel came into the midst of the sea on dry land. V'hamayim lahem choma, and the water was for them, choma, a wall, miminam, on their right hand, umismolam, and on their left hand. So there, you can certainly get the picture. We've seen many illustrations of this particular verse here. All right, so we don't have any Rashi on this, and so we'll take another verse here. Vayirdafu Mitzrayim. So the Egyptians pursued them. Rodef, the Radaf is to pursue. The Egyptians, or Egypt, right? Mitzrayim, Egypt, pursued, and Vayavo'u, and they arrived, Acharehem, they arrived after them, behind them. Kol sus paro, all the horse of Pharaoh, I'm translating it literally, okay? Kol, every horse of Pharaoh, Richbo, his chariots, V'farashav, and his horsemen, El Tochayam, into the midst of the sea. See if there's Rashi. Here we go. Kol sus paro. So Rashi is noting the fact that sus is singular, so it means all the horse of Pharaoh. V'chi sus echad haya, and he's asking a rhetorical question: was there only one horse? Ella, but what it's trying to say, the language of it is trying to tell us, Magid, it's telling us, she'ein kulam cheshuvim lifnei hamakom, that all these horses, remember, the horse back then was like the tank, right, of the army. It was considered a huge benefit, right, an advantage of an army if it had a cavalry, or certainly charioteer, allowed them to move quickly, very quickly, and gave them a height over the people they were fighting, right? Ela kasusachad. All these horses, right, of the Egyptian army, imagine it, was like just one horse as far as God was concerned. And that's what the verse is trying to tell us. I am going to stop here, and we will continue, God willing, tomorrow.
I don't get the point of it, though, of being like one horse for God.
Oh, just that all this, from our standpoint, this would be like such a powerful force that we wouldn't be able to resist them.
But
And
an army of horses would always be like one horse for God. And everything in the world is like one horse for God. So what's the point of having to?
because I think it wants to demonstrate how powerful, how powerful that the language itself is emphasizing that point. That,
Okay, I
that
gotcha.
from God's perspective, from a human perspective, maybe this appeared to be an irresistible force, and from God's perspective,
Yeah, no problem.
well, yes, exactly. So we'll stop here, and please God continue tomorrow.